Good day. There's a saying that success has many fathers and failure is an orphan. We can very well say this was very visible at a NATO summit held in The Hague, Netherlands, where coming off a spectacular intervention in the Israeli-Iranian war, President Trump claimed accolade for being the one to have stopped the war. It was, even if he was a co-belligerent in that war, it was a very great thing to have done because it took the world off the precipice of a very new historical reality that would not have been good. But on the converse side, while Trump was being feted, celebrated, and praised for his intervention, Ukrainian President Zelensky caught a lonely figure, and for the very first time, we saw a big translation in his part. For the past 3 years, Zelensky had been always seen in the garb of a military personnel. He had put himself out as a war leader and was always seen wearing military garbs, and because Ukraine is at war. But the Zelensky that came for this NATO conference was a broken man. And as a broken man, he had to humble himself. And for the very first time in almost 3 years, he dusted up his suit and came to a meeting and a gathering of world leaders with a suit. Besides, he was also in a very beggarly state, and a lot of people avoided him. Leaders who had fitted him before were not so sure of how relationship with him will be looked at by the American president. Ultimately, he did get a meeting with the American president, but there was no doubt that the Hungarian, Slovakian, and some other presidents around him who always were either opposed to him did everything they could to avoid him this time around, and they weren't shy about it. But in all, he may not have got what he went out to seek. I dare say that he left rather disappointed. He left as a failure again. Good day and welcome to my channel, Ebima Mungo's Perspective on Global Affairs. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe. If you have any opinions about what I say in my video, please leave it in the comment section. But don't forget to like and share. President Donald Trump has had an interesting few months since he came into office. He left in 2020, but he came back and he has realized that the world has changed. First, he left bullying China, but he came back and realized that the China that he left behind is a much different China than the one he has come to see. Now China is the one calling the shots. This China has said that we hold on to rare earth metal and we will negotiate with you based on our complete and total domination of the supply chains of not only rare earth metals, but quite a lot of materials needed for industry by the whole world. So this is a stronger China. He has also come to find out that the Israeli lobby is very unrelenting. If you collect money from people like Mariam and Aldersil, they will want you to do a lot more than that money you collected. They will want you to take America into war with their neighbors and the enemies of Israel, sacrifice American resources, materials, and people on behalf of Israel. He just managed to dribble his way out of one very tense situation where it was demanded of him to join Israel in a war with Iran. But he has also come to find out that the people who make up the G7, they are toothless. They are not as relevant as they used to be. When he left, the G7 used to contribute significantly to global GDP. But now the BRIC nations control well over 60, 70% of economic and industrial output all over the world. And now they trade among themselves and they don't particularly need the G7 as they used to. In fact, without China, most members of the G7 will have their economic collapse. That's the simple truth. They need China's market and China's manufacturing know-how. Trump has also found out that there can be pushback from his base, his MAGA base, who he thought he could bypass and go to war on behalf of Israel, held him to account, were vocal about it, and pushed back against that action. So Trump was forced to realize that if he loses his base, he loses his presidency. He just didn't want to take that risk. But in all, you can still say that Trump has won spectacular victories. One thing is very clear. Trump has said, and I've said this in several other videos, President Trump is going to exert his revenge on the Ukrainian people and President Zelensky. There is nothing in this world that is going to convince President Trump to support Ukraine in a war with Russia. And to show you that, in this NATO conference, President Trump made sure that there was no mention, no vilification, no name calling on Russia in any form of the communique. And there was also no mention of Ukraine. This is very different from when Ukraine was the center of every meeting held by the Western world in the past 3 years, where Zelensky would bestride everywhere and be like a world leader. In fact, he was being compared to Churchill, but not anymore. Now, he comes kappa begging in his hand, begging for, don't forget the people of Ukraine. Please, we will need $40 billion to balance our budget. That was what he requested of the G7. And now, even with the NATO, he says he needs $140 billion to be able to sustain not only the military campaign. He is unrelenting in his request that the Western world support his economy and his military. So Trump has come to see that he is now he has been placed on a pedestal. He has won so many victories. He has decimated the Democratic Party. He is pushing his agenda in the domestic scene across. And over time, even though it's not reported, as effusively as it was when he was being opposed, he has won several legal victories within America. But even then, he's still moving through the maze of international relations with carefulness. He has come to the realization that the America he left behind was a unipolar world, but the America he has come to see is a multipolar world. When he left in 2020, Russia was always a country he wished to have better relationship with, but Russia was not at war with the whole West. And having gone through war in the past 3 years with the whole West, Russia is a strengthened, stronger, and more powerful ally. Russia has shown technological strengths and innovations that now even surprises everybody. Now the talk in the West is that Russia is building arms, developing at a pace that makes Europe and the West need to step up in their own innovation. Their output in military hardware is way, way, way ahead of that of the collective West combined. So this is the Russia he has come to meet, one that has stood the full brunt of American power, NATO power, and using Ukraine as a proxy, and have not only withstood it, but have gone ahead to capture 4 oblasts: Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk in Ukraine. But that's not all. He has also come to see that the China he left behind is not the China that he has come to see. China is now the largest trading partner of 128 countries. China has skillfully created a financial pathways to facilitate their trade with almost every member of that 120 countries, save for some of the Western countries. They've created currency systems, currency swap systems. They've created um, a chips system where they can process financial transactions between countries, and they've created their own alternative to SWIFT, which is the chips, as I've said. Slowly, the influence of the Chinese yuan has grown. Even champions like Huawei that he tried to kill are no more the companies he left behind. They've risen like phoenix and become champions of Chinese technology and innovation. Huawei now has its own operating system, has its own AI chips, and also has come back as a consumer goods producer, producing high-end um, chips and high-end smartphones, an industry that was killed when Trump was there. So this is the reality Trump has come into. But there's no denying that the Trump we are seeing now is a much more politically savvy human being. Yeah, I will say this because his total and complete domination and imposing his will on NATO meant that for the very first time, one of the things that came out of the NATO summit was that they should move military spending to 5% of GDP. This is what he had said in the first tenure, and it was dismissed. But now with the reality of the strength of Russia and the strength of countries like even Iran, the changing tide of geopolitics in the world just makes them realize that they need to increase their military spending. But even then, it is a fact now that one of the few means by which you can stimulate your economy is military spending. But even at the fact that countries like Germany are now saying they want to increase their military spending, there's also concern because America is trying to pull back from NATO. America's pulling back from NATO has become the reason why Trump is now feted, wheedled, praised, his ego massaged, because nobody wants America to leave Europe. Especially the Baltic countries who have been very belligerent against Russia for the past 5 years, and who see the fact that if America leaves Europe, they cannot be replaced by Germany, who has 5,000 soldiers now in Lithuania. That won't do. The Russian bear is bearing down on them, and it will just take a number of Orishniks and all their military. So they are scared. I bet many countries are still even scared of a militarized Germany. Militarized Germany has never been a good thing for Europe. They dominate, and they are by far the biggest country in industrial output, capacity, and finance. And then when they add a military industrial complex to it and a military hardware growth to that, it becomes a problem for everybody. So America is really needed in Europe as a pacifier. But Trump says he is not ready and willing to carry the load of Europe anymore. And that is where a lot of countries are. So going back to Zelensky, Zelensky was a very humble man in this meeting. He did have his meeting finally with Donald Trump. And in that meeting, he now made a case for America to give Ukraine Patriot missile systems. Because you see, since Operation Spiderweb, the Russians have been unrelenting in their attack of Kiev. Geran 2 drones, Iskander missiles, Zekon missiles. They rain down in loads and hundreds every day in Kiev, blowing up military facilities and sometimes civilian facilities. The pace and the cadence is inundating Kiev with bombs and missiles. And for this, he needs some form of protection. All their interceptor missiles have been gone up, have been expended, and even the Patriot missiles that were donated by the European countries and America have been blown up. Kiev is left bare and there's nothing. But Trump says that he listened to him for an hour make his speech and say where he said he will even pay for it with his own money. That the Europeans were willing to donate money to Ukraine for America to give them the arms. But Trump says that no, we really don't have. The Ukraine war, the Israeli war with Iran exposed the shortcomings of the Patriot missile system, THAAD systems, and all that, and the interceptors are even they expended a lot of it. So as Foreign Minister Marco Rubio had said recently, there just isn't enough Patriot missiles to go round for, and even none to sell to Ukraine, even if they had the money. But I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised. This Trump is one who has already called out Zelensky as being a salesman who will come to America, wheedle and talk sharply and smartly to Biden and get back home with $60 billion. That isn't happening under his watch. As far as it's concerned, Zelensky is not going to use a salesmanship pitch and charm on him. So this is where he is. Zelensky had some moments of euphoria. The success of Operation Spiderweb got to him. But Trump is a man who, like an elephant, remembers. And he remembers the role Zelensky and the Ukrainian nation played in his impeachment. And like I've said, nothing. The European people who are begging on Ukraine's behalf are not going to make him change his mind. He is never going to. Rather, he has even tried to get some money out of Ukraine through a rare earth deal. And then he's escaping any attempt to try and make him to give money to Ukraine by urging them to go to make peace with the Russians. So it is a very humbled Zelensky that we saw. One who came in a much more appropriate garb for the gathering. He wore a coat for the first time in 3 years. Got to show humility. And that is where Zelensky has taken Ukraine. Zelensky has a need to continue to be in Ukraine. Let's not forget that Zelensky has been this reason $300 billion have moved into Ukraine. People do say that there's quite a lot of development, despite all the destruction the Russians are raining down on Ukraine. There's a lot of development going on in Kiev and all the cities of Ukraine, despite their losses. But also, we should know that when he started this adventure at the urging of Boris Johnson and Biden, they had a full country and they had over 40 million people. But at this time, they've lost 4 oblasts and they've lost over 10 million people to different cities and different countries in Europe and America who are now refugees. Their demographics has been lost. Their country, they are the most vibrant and richest and most endowed parts of Ukraine has been lost. And that is the legacy that he has led for his country. At the same time also, he's being urged to do an election. So for that reason, he has even started to come up with dual citizenship machinations, new laws to try to disenfranchise some people who he feels have accepted Russian citizenship, so they will not have a right to be part of the election. So this is where it is. He's thinking now of getting back into being elected because the Russians have said that they don't see him as a legitimate leader because his term expired last May and he's now ruling Ukraine under a martial law. But as long as it's useful to Ukraine getting money from the West, they kept him there. But now that Trump is not giving him money and Trump is not ready to come out hard on his opponent, Russia, it now seems like it's a losing battle. Already they're losing. They're losing a lot on the war front. They're losing in Sumy. They're losing their cities like Pokrovsk. They're losing even all the strongholds, the remaining strongholds in Luhansk. Almost just a village or 2 left, and Donetsk. And they will soon lose more ground in Zaporizhia. So this is where they are now. They are losing. And it was the loser we saw, the failure who came to the NATO meeting, and we're also probably one of the countries that will feel compassionate about him and promise him some more money, as was done in the last time he went to Canada, and the Canadians gave him some money and support so that it wouldn't be that he went back empty-handed after the G7 meeting. So this is how the fortunes of man changes, and the fortunes of a country is determined by the leadership. At one point in time, that leadership had the full support of the American president, but not anymore. This American president is exerting his revenge on Ukraine, and Zelensky and the Ukrainian people are in a bad place. We really don't know what's going to happen. If you have any ideas of what you think may happen to the Ukrainians, put them in the comment section. But this is where I end my video for today. If you also have any other opinions about what may be the reality going forward for Trump, for Russia, and for Zelensky, put them also in the comment section. Thank you for being with me to this time. Like, share. I'll see you in my next video.